Thanks a lot. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you can hear me well. Otherwise, I will hear it from you. And good morning to myself. Indeed, my name is Teun van Ruitenburg. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Netherlands Institute for the Study of Crime and Law Enforcement. And it's quite an early start for me, but I'm really happy to be able to present to you my research all the way from Amsterdam this morning. It's a shame I cannot see you. I cannot see the public, so I can't see to whom I'm speaking. But there you go. Now you can see you. I have the pleasure, I know, of speaking at a really nice venue this afternoon, and I hope to be able to attend this conference in person one day. What I will be presenting on today is the result of years and years of research, and also the result of a joint effort, actually, meaning that I will present a paper I wrote together with my colleague, Professor Arjan Blokland, about the Dutch approach to outlaw motorcycle gangs, specifically focusing on the approach. So if we go to the next slide, please, we will see a short outline of my presentation. As we also did in our paper, I will start off with a very short introduction on the problem of outlaw motorcycle gangs in the Netherlands, after which I will spend most of my time focusing on the whole of government or multi-agency approach to outlaw motorcycle gangs. And before opening up questions, the floor to questions, I will speak a little bit more on the effects of the approach and also some recent developments in the Netherlands. And before introducing the problem of outlaw motorcycle gangs, the first topic of this presentation, let me first say something about the research itself and the data underlying this paper, because in this paper we more or less summarized the currently research being done in the Netherlands on OMCGs, focusing both on quantitative data and also qualitative research. On the one hand, for instance, in the past decade even, Arjan Blokland, together with Sjoukje van Deuren, conducted multiple quantitative studies where they analyzed police data on all known OMCG members in the Netherlands, basically to learn more about the relationship between crime and OMCG membership. And on the other hand, I, especially in my own PhD research, I focus not so much on the OMCG members themselves, but way more on how the different state agencies in the Netherlands try to tackle the problem of OMCGs in the Netherlands from the 70s to present days. Next slide, please. So in the Netherlands, we became familiar with the term outlaw motorcycle gang quite late, only in 2014, actually. And of course, we did know the term from abroad. We knew it from the literature, but it was only in 2014 when the Dutch government, in official documents, began to use the term outlaw motorcycle gangs to address the problem of motorcycle clubs being involved in crime and public disorder. So in 2014, the police made public a list of 15 clubs, of which you now can see the back colors of these clubs. And this focus is the result of a nationwide whole of government approach to 1% MCs that started in 2012. And this is, of course, not to say that the Dutch government was not familiar with the clubs at all, but before 2012, this attention mostly centered on the various charters of the Hells Angels. And the reason why the Dutch government launched a nationwide approach to other clubs as well was mostly due because tensions between clubs rose, and the fear of a so-called biker war, as we have seen in other countries, was arrived in the Netherlands. Next slide, please. So a very short introduction on the problem of outlaw motorcycle gangs in the Netherlands, just to give you an idea of the problems and of the crimes related to OMCGs. In 2020, we had only, I said only because I assume it's much more in Australia, we had about 1,800 people registered as an OMCG member by the police. And as you can see, this number, which is also true for the number of chapters, by the way, actually increased since the national approach started in 2012. Which is also most probably a result of a registration effect. And we know from quantitative studies in the Netherlands that members are or have been disproportionately involved in crimes. Minor crimes, but most definitely also serious organized crimes and even murder. And 85% of the Dutch members have a criminal record with an average of 9 convictions per person. However, I would like to emphasize, to make the point, that although members are indeed involved in serious crimes, there are clearly differences between the different OMCGs on the level of the club. And this is shown on the left side of the sheet, where the position of the club, which are represented by the circles, is dependent on the number of convictions of organized crimes offenses by the members and the office bearers. And you can see that the larger circles on the sheet represent the clubs that indeed have been convicted for organized crime, such as the Hells Angels, Bandidos, and Satudara, most definitely. But the smaller clubs on the left corner have only little convictions for organized crime offenses. And this is also why we know from more qualitative data analysis that most OMCGs do not show, at least based on the police reports, obviously, to be involved in planning and the coordination of crime, and especially organized crime. So if we go to the next slide then. Oh, yep. In 2012, as I said before, the Dutch government came up with a coordinated Dutch whole of government multi-agency approach to fight OMCGs. And what is interesting to see is that this approach was built on the idea of raising barriers and built on a barrier model even. And the term barrier was not randomly chosen. And I would like to show you this because it's important to understand how the Dutch approach was built on. But because this barrier was, as I said, not randomly chosen, because it expresses and fits within a wider practice by which state and non-state agencies try to raise barriers to various forms of organized crime. And indeed, in the Netherlands, you will notice that the word barrier is often used in the context of organized crime in white papers of the Dutch government. And since the 90s, and especially after the turn of the millennium, the Dutch government has adopted, more or less a situational crime prevention model aimed at preventing organized crime through this whole of government approach. And under this approach, the focus is not so much on the offender, but on the criminal activity and the opportunities underlying crime. And crime is investigated also as more or less a logistic process which insights are formulated in what I've called a barrier model. And this barrier model helps to raise barriers to crime, both by public and private agencies. This is just a small background, a theoretical background, because if you go to the next slide, I would like to show you first this, and it's in Dutch, so you can't read it, but I did include it anyway, because to give this gives you an example of how in the Netherlands different parties, different private and public agencies are trying to build barrier models and to, for instance, to give shape to this situation of focus. Various agencies in the past 2 decades have developed these barrier models, and you can see on the sheet now a barrier model focusing on to tackle illegal hemp cultivation. Was produced in 2012. You are actually looking at a simplistic version of the logistic process of hemp cultivation, starting from the left side, the first step, which involves the need of a criminal to find a suitable location to cultivate hemp, to furnishing the location, and further down the line, the actual production process, to the final steps of even selling the hemp and ultimately to using the illicit gains from it. And it's viewed as a crime script. You most definitely be familiar with this concept. And you can see above and underneath this crime script, you will see the different organizations in play actually, or that should play a role in raising barriers again within this production process of illegal hemp cultivation. So, and if you go to the next slide, please. Take a sip of my water. This whole barrier, the raising barriers and the barrier model framework was used in 2012 by the national government to also build the national approach to OMCGs. So also to fight OMCGs, there was a barrier model built. And this is quite interesting because in the present case, the idea was not to raise barriers to the criminal process of one particular form of crime, such as the case with illegal hemp cultivation, but actually to raise barriers to a larger phenomenon or group that is involved in a wide variety of crimes. So in other words, policy-wise, outlaw motorcycle gang itself was taken as the criminal logistic process. You can see here the quotation of one of the first white papers published in 2012, where the Ministry of Security and Justice actually launched this barrier model to set 3 goals. In short, hinder criminal opportunities of the members, to reduce the popularity of the culture in the Netherlands, and also to counter, to the untouchable and intimidating image of OMCGs. So if we go to the next slide, you will see quite a big sheet with a lot of information. You can see here pretty much the crime script as it was proposed in 2012. It had a different form. I had to redo it a little bit for this presentation, but you can see actually in 2012 that the approach of outlaw motorcycle gangs was focusing on 8 focal points, 8 pillars, if you like. And the first 2 pillars in red focused mainly on prioritizing the criminal prosecution of members and on taking away the illicit earnings of these members, which was pretty much still the task of the traditional partners such as the police and public prosecution service. When launched a zero tolerance approach of any type of crime committed by an OMCG member, which later was also focused on pretty much mainly the leaders of the clubs, aimed at frustrating the leadership of the clubs. And if you go, and besides this criminal prosecution, which was aimed at increasing the cost of crime and reducing the benefits of crime, there was also a large focus on clubhouses, events, and the hotel and catering industry, which was mainly a task of the local governments, which will be explained later on in this presentation. And focusing on the clubs, events was a means to take away the offender convergence setting, also again in the same line of this situational crime prevention approach, and also to reduce public confrontations and the presence of these OMCG members in the public domain. Also in blue, there was a strong focus on members working for the public, as public servants for the Dutch government, and also in the private security sector. Again, also to reduce the criminal opportunities for members to actually work in this domain. Later on, the final pillar was focusing on football hooligans, trying to make sure that to decrease actually the influx of new members and so-called foot soldiers within OMCGs. And you see a lot of pictures, and to show that in this crime script or in this barrier model, a lot of organizations were involved, not only again the public sector, but also private sectors such as football clubs, and also mainly the hotel and catering industry, and also the private security sector, etc. So if we go to the next slide, I present to you some examples of how this played out in practice. Again, take a sip of my water, please. And one important focus point clearly is the aim of closing and or preventing clubhouses. Again, as a way to take away the offender convergence setting and to make them, the OMCG members and the OMCG as a clubs, less visible to society actually. This was typically a very important focus point for local governments and the mayor. You can see here a quote by a mayor who said to me during my research that, as you can read it, when an OMCG member will apply for a permit, he will definitely try to deny this permit as a way to make sure that these OMCG members can't take an area or a place within his or her municipality. And this was done, for instance, as the example shows, by denying building permits, because, for instance, the clubhouse won't fit in the local government plan of the municipality, but also by denying permits needed to sell alcohol within the clubhouse. And what was also done in the past decade, that they really checked if known clubhouses that were already established were established along all safety regulations, whether all safety regulations were in fact in place. For instance, to check on fire safety regulations, and if not, that would also be a reason to close down a clubhouse. What is also interesting is that mayors and also police chiefs have these so-called stop conversations, where they actually invite members of an OMCG to the city council or to the police center to actually, well, have a so-called stop conversation and say to this member, well, we know what you're planning to do. You are planning to build a clubhouse. Please stop it. And if you continue this, we'll make sure that this will not, this won't be happening. So these sub conversations was a way to make sure, or at least to try these members from canceling out their place in the municipality. And this is also done in on the next slide in the field of events. Because also besides the clubhouse, events were a very, very important focus point for the Dutch government. In the beginning, so at the start of 2012, this was mainly because OMCG-related events were closed down on the basis of possible risks of OMCG members, well, violently clashing with each other because of this fear of this biker war. But later on, after 2012 and 2014, 2016, municipalities, beyond the actual risks of an event, were trying to ban out these OMCG-related events altogether. For instance, also because by denying a permit to, well, organize a large-scale event. However, this was not always possible simply because members are, of course, free to organize, to go to an event center or to go to the pub and simply ask the owner if he or she is willing to host an event there. You don't need a permit in the Netherlands for that. And also in these cases, so in the cases where the members go to a pub to ask, can we organize an event here? Sometimes the pub owner was invited by the police and or the mayor for this so-called stop conversation, saying, well, please don't host this event for these OMG members, otherwise you might lose your own permit. So that's pretty harsh, actually, but this is another example of how these barriers were raised. Another focus point is shown on the next sheet. Yep, please go to the next slide. There you go. Yep, perfect. Thanks. Local pub owners, as I shown, as a private sector, private security, as a private affiliate to this approach, local pub owners also played still a very important role in raising barriers to these OMCGs. And this is shown, for instance, on the left image, where you can see the front door of a pub or a restaurant, I'm not sure, with a poster stating that colors are not allowed within these premises. And this could be on their own initiative, but also because local governments adopted in their local ordinance and in the local alcohol licensing and catering act a rule stating that it's not allowed for pub owners to permit or host a gathering of an OMCG in their own venue. And recently, local governments even adopted a similar rule for OMCGs that were banned, stating that it's not allowed for these members of these banned clubs to wear their colors on the streets, even in the public domain. And interestingly, most recently in this year, the Supreme Court, this rule was revoked by the Supreme Court because it was used also against clubs that were not banned irrevocably by the Supreme Court, which is against human rights. And slowly coming down the final sheets of my presentation, on the next sheet, you will see another example, one of the final examples, I think, focusing on labor, where the government since 2012, as I said before, is trying to divert members away from certain professions, especially from civil servants, including, for instance, from the fire department and military. And besides this, also cooperation is sought with the private security sector by raising regulations stating that members of an OMCG are not welcome to work for a private security company. And the news article on the right side of the sheet again shows that it was and still is not always possible to raise these type of barriers in the Netherlands. Because this case was about a member of the Hells Angels who was actually fired by the organization, but after a long judicial battle, was able to reclaim his job with the fire department simply because it wasn't allowed to fire someone from an organization that is not banned irrevocably by the Supreme Court. Next slide, please. I have to say, things have clearly changed in most recent times, like most recent times, as the Public Prosecution Service successfully filed multiple requests to ban OMCG outlaw motorcycle gangs in the Netherlands. And among them are some of the larger clubs, such as the Hells Angels, Satudara, and Bandidos. So basically the larger OMCGs of which their members have been involved, mostly involved in crime offenses, have now also been irrevocably banned by civil law. And so the current question in the Netherlands is still, well, what does it actually mean in practice? So on the criminal law, it is punishable to continue the workings of an organization that is in fact banned by civil law. But when this is indeed the case, what that actually means in practice remains a question open for debate. However, I have to say, recently there was a case. A former president of the Bandidos and motorcycle club was in fact sentenced to 8 hours community service because the Bandidos MC Holland is banned in the Netherlands by the Supreme Court, as I said. But this member, this old, well, ex-president, nonetheless wore a T-shirt and a cap with signs of the club. So he was banned, or he was sentenced to 80 hours community service. If you go to one of the final slides, I think it's the final one, to give you a short overview on some of the effects. We can't tell if these are actually effects, but these are the recent developments we see in well, in the field in the Netherlands. You currently notice that, well, as a starting point, there's much more information and knowledge on outlaw motorcycle gangs in the Netherlands compared to the situation before 2012. Also, the number of clubhouses and events decreased. And what you recently see is that members and OMCGs are also less visible in the public domain. Also, what the Dutch government at least says is that there's less public disorder related to OMCGs in the Netherlands. And the criminal prosecution folks, mostly the criminal prosecution, managed to frustrate what they say is the leadership and organizational capacity of OMCGs. And so overall, looking at the goals, you can say that this approach has been pretty effective. At the same time, what you see now is that mostly because OMCG members are less visible in the public domain, it's also more difficult, as the police tell me, more difficult to uphold an intelligence position on the scene, on the OMCG scene. And you can also question, at least in the final years and most recent years, whether this whole approach could also have helped to more or less strengthen the outlaw status and image of some of the OMCGs. What is also interesting to see, you've seen it on one of the earlier slides, is that since 2012, more OMCG members, there became more, the number increased, so the number of OMCG members, but also chapters increased. And you can see that most definitely in the arrival of new, what they say, fluid clubs or even brotherhood. So we've seen in the Netherlands the arrival of other types of clubs that more or less copy-pasted the outlook and the framework of OMCGs, like the traditional OMCGs, like that, for instance, the Hells Angels. Currently writing a paper on the risk of human rights violations, because you will see in the Netherlands there's also some risk, especially in the field of this administrative approach by the local government, that this could also risk human rights violations, which could also be a negative by effect of this whole approach. Closing down almost this presentation is the question that is still up to my mind and still open for discussion, if whether raising barriers to outlaw motorcycle gangs is also actually a barrier to organized crime. And this is still a question, because we've seen in the Netherlands, but also other research, that it's not the case that every OMCG and every member is always involved in organized crime. Some do, some don't. But if you raise a barrier to a clubhouse, for instance, or an event or whatnot, could this indeed be a barrier to fight organized crime, or is it just a barrier to cancel out the phenomenon visibly in the public domain? And this is a question I've been thinking about a lot. and hope to do some more research on in the future. Another question, and then I will actually really stop talking, is another question that, well, is often unanswered to date, is the question how members themselves respond to the measures taken, respond to the barriers taken, and how this affected them, the members personally, by sometimes these far-reaching measures. And this is also why I currently, together with Sjoukje van Deuren and Robbie Rox, are working on another project where we actually finished interviewing 24 Hells Angels members, current members in the Netherlands, where we were currently analyzing the data, and we hope to give you a new picture on how these members of this specific of this club actually responded to the barriers raised, and how how are they doing now. So that this really could be a very nice extra insight in this whole approach, and most also about the effects of this approach. Little under 4 minutes left, I see, so this is quite a nice time for me to wrap up, I think. Thanks for your attention. Really happy to again to be able to present you my research, and as known, it is published already, the article, so please take a look at the article, and otherwise please send me an email if you want to learn more about the whole approach. Thanks a lot for this opportunity.